In addition to that, we had abundant artesian wells and springs throughout the basin. So neighborhoods were built around those called flowing wells or Sabino Springs. And we also had wonderful bosques or forests along the river of mesquites, cottonwoods, hackberries, and willow trees. And all this vegetation acted like the living sponge, and it diffused the erosive force of the falling raindrop. And then the water made its way more calmly after it went through the canopy and hit a mulch sponge layer of organic matter below. So when we got our 12 inches of annual rainfall, the bulk of that infiltrated the watershed. It didn't run off. The reverse is true today. We've killed off our river through overpumping and some other means I'll cover, and we've replaced the sponge with pavement. Over 30% of Tucson, Arizona is paved with streets, driveways, sidewalks, buildings and so on. But that's only the official pavement. There is far more pavement than that in the form of denuded, compacted soil areas that act like adobe brick patios. So now when we get the 12 inches of rain falling from the sky, we're lucky if just a fraction of that infiltrates the soil. So we're killing our local resources through a number of ways. The two primary ways is first, we're over-pumping or over-consuming our local water resources at a rate much more rapid than natural recharge. Okay, so the water table has dropped over 300 feet since the early 1900s, continues to drop at a rate of 4 feet per year, and the water quality continually worsens. We've killed off the river, all those springs, and all those artesian wells. And then we've simultaneously hardened the arteries of the watershed. We've replaced the vegetation on the banks with concrete stabilization, paved over much of it. So we've crippled the watershed's ability to naturally recharge itself. All right? So let's look more closely at the watershed. You can see we are a hydrophobic society. We're literally afraid of water because we're doing everything we can to get rid of that water as quickly as possible. So a typical commercial development, 95 to 100% paved over, the water's shooting right out. Typical housing development, very similar. We put the homes on the high part of the lot, that's good, so they're not flooded. We send roof runoff right past the landscape into the street and the storm drain and the guns of Navarone shoot the water right out of the system. So we're literally dehydrating our community through our infrastructure. Okay, we're getting rid of the free water, so then we have to import water from great distances at great cost. So this is a typical landscape just put in. You see these white rings of salt? I've seen a lot of that around this community as well. That is the salt that's been deposited by the municipal water. Okay? As we downdraft our aquifer, the water becomes more saline. It's not the same in all aquifers, but it is in ours. And then we're importing Colorado River water, as you are, and that is extremely salty. For every acre-foot of water we import of Colorado River water, we import over 2,000 pounds of salt. Okay? And as we apply this salty water, the salt levels in the soil continually increase. And by doing this, we're actually creating landscapes more susceptible to drought by irrigating. Okay? Because as you apply salty water, the salt levels increase. It becomes harder and harder for plants to uptake water and to photosynthesize. Okay? Whereas if we instead irrigated primarily with salt-free water, like rainwater, we would leach the salts out of the root zone over time. And thereby, with irrigation, we would make the plants less susceptible to drought because they could get by with less water. They could more efficiently use what they have. Here's two more photos of Tucson, a little bit south of the photos I showed you before. This is the only bit of the river you could see in the 1940s. The rest of your view is blocked by massive cottonwoods, willows, and mesquite trees. And then in just 40 years, the same vantage point, there's the boulder in the foreground and the saguaro. 40 years later, there's the boulder and the saguaro. We lost the forest because we so downdrafted the groundwater table, the roots could no longer access the water and it died out. We lost the sponge, we lost the forest, we lost the soil builder, the anchor. So here's where we have the rivers of today. They're in our streets. And it's no wonder we consider stormwater to be a problem or a liability instead of a resource. It's because we drain it off the surfaces where it would be a resource, such as our home landscapes and gardens, our commercial landscapes, street median landscapes, our parks and ball fields. We send it out of here into the street where it's a liability for traffic. But there's a boon in this for the tourism industry. We got to recognize the value of urban runoff kayaking. Okay? So this is my neighbor, Matt Weber, after he passed 2 cars on First Street during a summer rain. So when I talk about harvesting rain in the western U.S., people typically laugh or scoff, wondering, what rain are you talking about? Because there's a perceived scarcity. But in reality, there's an abundance. So in my community of almost 1 million people, more rain falls on the surface area of Tucson in an average year of rainfall than all its inhabitants consume of municipal water in a typical year.
Wow.
Okay? So to put it differently, the average Tucsonan uses 165 gallons of municipal water per person per day. But if you look at the rain falling on the surface area, divide that by the population in days a year, you find there's 235 gallons of rain per person per year falling on the surface area of Tucson. Okay, now that's not to say that rainwater should be our only water source. But it is to say that rainwater should be a water source. Okay? It's not even looked at that right now. So even in wetter climates like Asheville, North Carolina, this is a big issue because since people are not keeping the water on their sites, it flows down their dirt driveways off their recently tilled garden, and there's huge sediment loading running down, causing problems for the storm drains, and then clogging up the local creeks and killing off the fish populations. This is a big reason why the steelhead no longer run up and down as much as they used to. So I see we can take one of 2 paths. We can take the path to scarcity or the path to abundance. Currently, I think we're primarily on the path to scarcity, where we tend to create landscapes that drain water, topsoil, fertility out of the system, causing problems downstream. We send household gray water out of the system. So the resource base is steadily depleted, getting worse over time. We become aware of this, maybe even concerned, maybe even scared to be in the city, on the path to scare-city. Okay? So we can shift this around. Same landscape, tweaked a little bit. Now we're planting within or beside sunken water harvesting earthworks, rain gardens, okay? So then we raise our pathways or access ways. So we drain the water off of them to where it's a resource. These not only capture rainfall, they also capture leaf drops. So we get a closed nutrient loop of all that organic matter. We're not raking and blowing it out of the way and strip mining it. So the fertility is increased. We send household gray water into these same rain gardens that are also gray water gardens. You have gray water when there's no rain, and you have the rain when there is rain to wash and flush the salts out of the soil introduced by the gray water. So with this system, things steadily get better over time. They're enhanced. We become aware of this. We become happy about this. So happy we might want to take these here buns and do a little bun dance on a path to a bun dance. Yes. And if at any point in this talk your buns start twitching and you want to do a bun dance, you just jump up and do it. Because your bodies are all hydrologic cycles, and we don't want still water, we want moving water. Okay. So let's look at the 2 paths in a different context. So this is a typical housing development with excessive